Aviation safety means the state of an aviation system or organization in which risks associated with aviation activities, related to, or in direct support of the operation of aircraft, are reduced and controlled to an acceptable level. It encompasses the theory, practice, investigation, and categorization of flight failures, and the prevention of such failures through regulation, education, and training. It can also be applied in the context of campaigns that inform the public as to the safety of air travel. Aviation safety should not be confused with aviation security, which includes all of the measures taken to combat intentional malicious acts. In 1926 and 1927, there were a total of 24 fatal commercial airline crashes, a further 16 in 1928, and 51 in 1929, which remains the worst year on record at an accident rate of about 1 for every 1 million miles flown. Based on the current numbers flying, this would equate to 7,000 fatal incidents per year. For the 10-year period 2002 to 2011, 0.6 fatal accidents happened per 1 million flights globally, 0.4 per million hours flown, 22.0 fatalities per 1 million flights at 12.7 per million hours flown. From 310 million passengers in 1970, air transport had grown to 3,696 million in 2016, led by 823 million in the United States, then 488 million in China. In 2016, there were 19 fatal accidents of civil airliners of more than 14 passengers, resulting in 325 fatalities. The second safest year ever after 2015 with 16 accidents and 2013 with 265 fatalities. For planes heavier than 5.7 t, there were 34.9 million departures and 75 accidents worldwide, with 7 of these fatal for 182 fatalities, the lowest since 2013. 5.21 fatalities per million departures. In 2017, there were 10 fatal airliner accidents, resulting in 44 occupant fatalities and 35 persons on the ground. The safest year ever for commercial aviation, both by the number of fatal accidents as well as in fatalities. By 2019, fatal accidents per million flights decreased 12-fold since 1970, from 6.35 to 0.51. And fatalities per trillion revenue passenger kilometer decreased 81-fold from 3,218 to 40. Runway safety represents 36% of accidents, ground safety 18% and loss of control in flight 16%. The main cause is pilot in command error. Safety has improved from better aircraft design process, engineering and maintenance, the evolution of navigation aids, and safety protocols and procedures. There are 3 main ways in which risk of fatality of a certain mode of travel can be measured. Deaths per billion typical journeys taken, deaths per billion hours traveled, or deaths per billion kilometers traveled. The following table displays these statistics for the United Kingdom 1990 to 2000. Note that aviation safety does not include traveling to the airport. The first 2 statistics are computed for typical travels for respective forms of transport, so they cannot be used directly to compare risks related to different forms of transport in a particular travel, from A to B. For example, according to statistics, a typical flight from Los Angeles to New York will carry a larger risk factor than a typical car travel from home to office. But a car travel from Los Angeles to New York would not be typical. It would be as large as several dozens of typical car travels. And associated risk will be larger as well, because the journey would take a much longer time. The overall risk associated by making this journey by car will be higher than making the same journey by air, even if each individual hour of car travel can be less risky than an hour of flight. It is therefore important to use each statistic in a proper context. When it comes to a question about risks associated with a particular long-range travel from one city to another, the most suitable statistic is the third one, thus giving a reason to name air travel as the safest form of long-range transportation. However, if the availability of an air option makes an otherwise inconvenient journey possible, then this argument loses some of its force. Aviation industry insurers base their calculations on the deaths per journey statistic, while the aviation industry itself generally uses the deaths per kilometer statistic in press releases. Since 1997, the number of fatal air accidents has been no more than 1 for every 2 billion person miles flown, which is also 100,000 person miles, and thus one of the safest modes of transportation when measured by distance traveled. The death per billion hours when skydiving assume a 6-minute skydive. The death per billion journey when paragliding assume an average flight of 15 minutes. So 4 flights per hour. The Economist notes that air travel is safer by distance traveled, but trains are as safe as planes, and cars 4 times more hazardous for deaths per time traveled, and cars and trains are respectively 3 times and 6 times safer than planes by number of journeys taken. Between 1990 and 2015, there were 1874 commuter and